ensure that they create a rule that will enable to reduce carbon emission on atmosphere.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you see, in fact, with this problem, when you say some countries are reducing to agree to sign on this agreement, one country led is the US.
Yeah.
Trump refused to join the Paris Agreement.
That was left by Barack Obama.
Yes.
Yeah.
Reason being, their resources will lose market.
Yeah.
Because when this agreement comes, they will be the first one to face the challenge. And that is why you find them, they reduce to agree on this what? On this agreement for environmental conservation. But we find that there is also these other countries who have come together. They are saying they want to fund the resources to ensure that there is reduce of this problem majorly in Africa. In fact, according to the Paris Conference, Africa is supposed to get the bigger share of the resources to ensure there is reduction of these the greenhouse effect. And because of that, we find that there are other solutions which the world or the Africa as a continent must find out to ensure this problem is reduced. Let me get the views of the panelists. The floor is open. Yes.
At local
Madam
level,
Pamela, yes.
thank you. At local level,
Yes.
we can say that we can also contribute by making sure that we plant a tree.
Yes.
Let's encourage the issue of planting trees. Let's protect our catchment areas by avoiding deforestation. Let's find alternative sources of income or enterprises that farmers living along forests could adopt instead of charcoal burning,
Yes.
instead of cutting down trees for other purposes. Yes.
Definitely that is a good solution, which it all starts with an individual from the local ground. Mr. Karuga.
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
First of all, I would like to appreciate the efforts by the Kenyan government to ban use of polythene papers.
Yes.
These polythene papers, we call them non-biodegradable.
Yes.
That means that they cannot be digested by bacteria. So when released to the environment, they remain intact. They cannot decompose. Thank you. Now, so after a long time in the environment, we shall think of banning them. When you ban a piece of polythene, my sister here banned some pieces of polythene elsewhere,
Yes.
they release these gases. Where do they go? To the atmosphere. They cause what is known as greenhouse effect and the global warming.
Yes.
So at a personal level, we should know what we are doing. When you are banning that paper, not that the government is not there to check on what you are doing. You should be mindful that this is causing this and this menace. So avoid that at a personal level. And we thank the Kenyan government for that law. On the same note, we invite...
on that point of
Yeah.
polythene paper, as much as the Kenyan government is trying, the good hand should go to the Rwandan government.
Yeah.
Because Rwandan government, there is totally no use of polythene bags. So as much as we say Kenya is doing their best, but Rwanda have done to their level best. There is no use of polythene bags.
Yeah, and I say we start with a single step.
Yes.
So Kenyan government, the measures that are taking as of now, it's okay.
Yes.
We have just started. Another thing to add on that point, look at the issue of motor vehicle.
Yes.
If everyone get employed, the next thing it is to own a car.
Yes.
You own a car, I own a car, they own cars.
Yes.
Each car is emitting these gases. So instead of myself having my own vehicle and my sister here with hers, let us use one. Instead of emissions coming from two, we have emissions from one. Is that possible? Is that possible? Let us not compete. Let us not compete. Yeah?
Yes.
For example, all of us,
Yes.
mostly look at we came from one location.
Yes.
Why should I compete with Mr. Mujama there? Let
Because
us board
tomorrow-
one. Let us use Mr. Mujama's.
Because
Tomorrow we use mine.
Mr. Mujama
Yeah.
will be going to Nairobi
Yeah.
and will be going to Kisumu.
That is a different case now.
Yes.
But like now, we have the same course here.
Yes.
Yes, I do concur with the
With the-
biochemistry,
yes.
Sam Karuga.
Yes.
Again, we have technology which is coming, modern trains.
Yes.
These modern trains, Africa should embrace modern trains.
Electric trains.
Electric trains, I mean.
Yes.
Whereby, if you're leading to one destination, let us board that train to one destination.
Yes.
There's no need of using your car.
5 or 10 cars
Cars.
heading to one direction.
The only thing that you want is loudness.
Yes.
But just to show yourself that
You own a car.
You own a car.
Yes.
In addition to that,
Mhm.
I can say that maybe you're going to Nairobi, I'm going to Nairobi, he's going to Nairobi.
Yes.
You can just use a public transport. It's not a must. I go with
Yeah.
my car, you go with my car.
Yes. Mhm.
You just use a public transport. And
Once
yeah.
one vehicle can take a good number of people.
Yeah.
Yeah, and maybe to contribute to that,
Yes.
we can also promote the use of bicycles. If you are not going for a long distance, 10 kilometers, 5 kilometers, instead of using a vehicle and polluting the environment more,
Yes.
why don't we promote bicycles?
Yes.
We need to encourage our government to develop infrastructure so that we also have paths for cycling,
Yes.
and that will really help us.
And a good
Yeah.
example.
And in fact, even the use of bicycles is good for
For
health.
our health.
In fact, we find our government officials. You find an individual is having a motorcade of around 10 vehicles. And it's only one person. The rest we say it is security. 2, you find an individual owning 5 to 10 vehicles at home. One model to another model. All that one, whenever they use them, you find the wife using another vehicle, another child using a different vehicle. All this cause emission of these gases to the atmosphere.
Okay.
Yes.
Let me add again. Solution. I mean,
Yes.
in all this saga of global warming,
Yes.
there's something hidden, and this hidden puzzle, the scientific and learners should come up with something that will, what you call it, it will bring change. Because in every problem there's a solution,
Yes.
and every solution there's a market, and in any market there's a business to do. There's a what you call financial support.
Yes.
So in this global warming, if learners and African scientists like my friend Samuel Karuga, who is a biochemistry, him himself is a scientist. He should come up, reason, experiment, and do a research. Through that research, he will come up with a solution that will end up making him a billionaire or a millionaire. So in this saga of global warming, one thing God pointed out is when Jesus went into Jerusalem, he said, "Oh Jerusalem, if you could know the time and season that is in front of you, you could be able to manage and know what is you are supposed to do." So all in this saga of time of global, there's a solution.
Yes.
But this solution is hidden. It's up to African scientists and researchers to do a research and come up with a solution.
The solution should come from us as Africans.
Yeah.
We should create our own solution on how we take care of ourselves.
And I'm
Because we find the problem is majorly affecting ourselves.
Yeah. And I'm telling you, if you do that, those Western countries will end up imitating
Yes.
and giving them solution. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Anybody else with an addition?
In addition on what Madam Pamela said about planting of trees, I will also add that you plant plants that are resistant, that do not need to be planted in greenhouse gases in order for them to grow. Just plant plants that can be resistant to drought, diseases, and that will be okay.
In the natural environment, we reduce the use of greenhouses.
Yeah. And another thing about what Mr. Jimmy said about releasing carbon dioxide, you reduce the release of carbon dioxide. Apart from reducing, you can also store carbon dioxide in the ground. So the only thing is for us to know how can we trap that carbon dioxide and store it under the ground. Because we find that carbon dioxide is used for building, making of rocks. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, maybe on addition to that or on a different note, I'd like to call upon the legislative section of the government, whenever they are giving licenses or they are making the laws, they should make laws that should make those people who want to set up an industry to explain the measures they've put in place to make sure they control their emissions. They must be put to task to explain what are they doing, apart from setting up that plant there. How are they going to deal with these
Emissions.
harmful emissions?
Yes.
Yeah.
How are they able to conserve the
Yeah,
environment?
yeah.
So in each and every upcoming industry or existing industry,
Yeah,
there
they must
should be a
explain.
rule
Yeah.
on how should they manage their waste.
Yeah, that should
So that
become first.
it should be
Apart
the
from so
priority.
many advantages
Yes.
coming the same,
Yes.
what are you doing to curb this?
Yes. Because with all those advantages, the major problems come in
Yeah.
to emissions.
Yeah.
Maybe in countries like Kenya, we are a step ahead. What we only need is was enforcement, because MCA Act 1999 provided for the need for carrying out an EIA, environmental impact assessment,
Yes.
before any industry that is likely to have negative impacts on the environment is allowed to continue. So the major problem that we are facing is enforcement of the law. The law is there, but the problem is enforcement.
So we are reluctant to enforce the law.
Yeah, the law.
So-
Otherwise, if the law is followed, then we will ensure that all the industries that are put up have measures in place that will ensure that the waste and any other effect on the environment is taken care of.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah, now on
Yes.
on another different note,
Yes.
I look at a community. You know, the problem boils down to a community. Our vulnerable communities depend on the environment for the resources and for their livelihoods. So there's need to have greater monitoring and early warning of climate change and adverse effects, so that communities that are likely to be affected are warned in advance. For example, places where we have a lot of flooding, people should get the information early enough so that they can move to higher grounds to avoid death and loss of property. Places like where we have many of the pastoralists, normally affected by drought, the early warning signs should be there early enough to warn them so that they can be able to know where they can take their livestock, or to be able to know how they can access pasture for their livestock. Because we have had a problem in Kenya, especially, where so many livestock die during the dry
The dry
season.
seasons,
And
yes.
it keeps on
Occurring,
repeating,
yes.
occurring. Then why don't we take the necessary measure and ensure that we stop this menace once and for all?
Yeah, I do concur with Madam Pamela that Africans, since we were colonized, we have building house anyhowly. We found that there is no enough measures that have been taken by the government, African government. We found that a man or a person has built a house in a water channel.
Riparian land.
Riparian land, yeah.
Yes.
And we found that when the flood or the rain comes,
during the rainy
it
season.
hits the place.
Yes.
And few people know this, that these are problems that are
Yes.
affecting the entire continent. And we have, because I'm telling you, change is inevitable.
Yes.
One man in the Bible known as Noah, even himself knew change will come. And he managed to build an ark, so that he knew that the flood will come. But African people, when the government should take a measure, ensure that people who are built in a riparian land, it may seem like a good place to stay, but long last,
There is a problem.
There's a problem coming.
Yes. We assume there is no problem,
Yeah.
but at the end of the day, the problem is there.
Yeah.
And when the problem comes, we are not prepared for the effects which comes with it. So as we wind up, let me find any additional information.
Okay, I'd like to add that
Yes.
we find that we like cooking. We cook breakfast, we cook lunch, we cook supper. So I know we don't like buying food, but I see if we start buying food, maybe instead of cooking, you go and buy packed food, you come and eat. You will not have to emit any gases at your home. Yeah.
That is a good suggestion. That is a very good suggestion. But are we all comfortable with the bought food?
We are not comfortable just to avoid this emission of gases. Because the moment you cook morning, you cook afternoon, you cook evening.
But the health
Or apart
professional-
from that, if you cannot buy food,
Yes.
you cook extra food.
Yes.
And then you
But-
store them properly.
Not the answer from the Madam Pamela because it deals with things to do with agriculture.
Apart from that, the health professional tells us that avoid both food and you prepare your own food.
Yeah,
Because
that
for
is-
our health, we need to prepare our own food.
That is true, and I would like to remind Madam that the food that she's buying somewhere, it was cooked somewhere.
Yes.
The gases were already emitted. Yeah, yeah. It was emitted somewhere in large scale, because if I have to,
Yes.
yeah, large scale. For example, buy chips somewhere, they were cooked, a lot of them. So all the gases were emitted there.
In one place.
Yeah, all of them, massive.
Yes.
So that is it. On the same note, I'd like to say that on my part, we are Africans. And African is going to be hit hard by this mess. So it is incumbent upon ourselves, we know how to control this.
Yes.
Let us take it upon ourselves to do what is necessary at the moment. First of all, here in Africa, we say that the backbone of Africa is agriculture. Yeah? If you look at this mess, global warming, it has a major effect on agriculture. And if we rely on agriculture as a source of income, a source of livelihood, we are going to suffer.
Yes.
For example, these gases in the atmosphere, they mix with rainwater to form an acid rain. What do you think will happen when an acid rain falls in the water ponds where we have fish? That's an acid. What will happen?
They die.
We kill the aquatic animals.
Yes.
You rely on fish as a source of income. So that one will not work again. Another case, it is known that some plants work well within a certain limit of concentration of carbon dioxide. When it goes too high, they won't work. Photosynthesis won't take place. We are not going to have any crop production.
Yes.
So, and other cases like the acid rain on soil, we get acidified soil. This acid soil cannot do well, crops cannot do well in this,
Yes.
because their pH has been altered.
Yes.
We end up having what is known as loss of biodiversity, where we used to have certain plants or animals, they no longer exist, they extinct.
Yes.
So we have to deal with this case as early as now.
Thank you very much.
I have a few points to note here. One is that we need to develop our research unit in Africa, so that for one, we can be able to identify from the wild other animals and crops that can be domesticated. Because from research, we have found animals like Ibala, which looks like a goat, and it's a very good animal for meat and milk. We now have upland rice, which can grow in areas where there are no floods. So we can still get more from the wild and domesticate them, and they will improve on our food security. Another issue is on water harvesting. Because we are facing the issues of drought, we can harvest the rainwater and utilize this water well. We are told that in Israel, it's a desert.
Yes.
And yet they are the ones who are exporting food to us. What about us? We have a lot of water. We have Lake Victoria. We have a lot of rains.
We have a good environment.
Good environment.
Yes.
We can harvest that water and put it into use and ensure that our people do not suffer.
Yes. In fact, with your point, I remember somebody said, What we do, when there is rain, we just leave the water to flow to the rivers. And we only know that when the water flows to the rivers, it does not come back there once again. It is one way, it goes all the way to the ocean. The next day in the morning, you want to follow that water to the ocean to go and fetch water from the river or from the lake, which you have just left from your home. You want to go and fetch it somewhere else. Instead of just doing all that activity, we can just set up a good storage for the rainwater. When we store rainwater appropriately, we can use, and it will be good for us. We shall reduce all these other issues.
And maybe therefore to close, we need to ensure that our development agenda includes strengthening the ability of communities and countries to cope with climate change. We need to train people, we need to get awareness, we need to facilitate them, like in water harvesting and irrigation, so that we can all be happy when we have a nation that is food secure, when we have people whose medical care has been well taken care of. Thank you.
So as we wind up, there is a point which I noted somewhere. It says that countries can reduce harmful emission and the halt warming noted by IPCC chairman Rajendra Pachauri in April by investing in cleaner green technologies and changing consumer habits, but it is too late to prevent climate change from having sometimes severe impact on the planet. And it is the poorest of the poor in the world, and this includes poor people even in prosperous societies, who are going to be worst hit. The problem is there. We are trying to solve the problem, but we are not willing to do it effectively. That is why those people who are affected are getting affected more. And that is why all what we need to do is to ensure we put our efforts together. Each and everyone has to think of a way. What step can I do? Only one step. What step can I do to reduce this effect? So as we wind up, maybe I get a final remark from maybe the panelists. Let me start with Mr. Karuga.
Okay, I'd like to start by explaining how global warming comes about. First of all, we have some gases which are commonly known as greenhouse gases. Examples of this, we have methane gas, we have chlorofluorocarbon, we also have a very common gas, carbon dioxide, CO2.
Yes.
These gases, when released from the, say, industry, automobile, burning of forests, they escape to the environment, and when in the atmosphere, they form a layer of gases. These gases will absorb sun rays that are bouncing back from the surface of the earth. Instead of having them in the space, these rays are reabsorbed by the greenhouse gases and radiated back to the earth. So instead of them going to the space, they remain in the earth. The long run effect of this has got so many effects. We talk about melting of the ice on top of the mountain, flooding of rivers because of excessive water, and we have diseases that come about with a lot of water. So that is the global warming. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And just to add,
Yes.
the greenhouse gases that he has mentioned will prevent the heat generated from the earth from escaping into the higher atmosphere. And so when that heat remains, it continues to warm the earth and therefore increase the temperatures. Yes.
Thank you very much. Any addition, Madam Jackie?
One more thing about the reduction of this global warming. We can use the natural gas and the renewable fuels such as solar.
Now, we are told that united we stand. And so for this, I'm looking at the function, the role of African Union in all this.
Yes.
There is need to strengthen the African Union so that we can lobby for compensation of the most affected countries, and these are in Africa, by the industrialized nations, because industrialized nations are gaining. They are able to develop technologies. They have enough income and can take care of their people in terms of health. But in Africa, we don't have that capacity.
Yeah.
Therefore, it will only be fair if they can compensate African countries. If we are united, we can also put pressure on countries emitting higher amounts of greenhouse gases. Example being the USA and China. So that these two countries and others can sign and implement the Kyoto Protocol that will ensure that they reduce the emissions of the greenhouse gases. Such countries should also support development of technology in African countries that would support sustainable development of these countries. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Yes.
The conclusion is, to me, it said that let us study the responsibility that God gave to human being as Adam. In the beginning, God created the earth, but man became so irresponsible for what we call neglecting environmental take care. And all this problem that it's causing carbon emission, we must make sure that, as I concur with Madam Pamela, we reduce the cutting down of trees.
Yes.
And using, again, embracing latest technology to ensure that we curb this animal known as global warming in Africa.
Thank you very much. Somebody else? Okay. As we close, Mr. Davidson, who is a specialist in energy and the co-chair of the IPCC, said that take energy. If you upgrade to cleaner energy technology, it will take considerable investment, more than a country would make otherwise. Who will pay for that additional cost? Because it is the international community that can come up with the means, but if we put a long list of bureaucratic obstacles and conditionalities on it, those countries will not be in a position to access the funds and the problem will persist. So, therefore, it is upon us to ensure that as Africa, we fight so that the modernized countries can be able to compensate us for the damages they are causing to the African nation. We are on the program Talking to Africa, and today's topic was, which move should Africa take to reduce the effects of global warming? Remember to subscribe on the hashtag See It, Speak It. Watch us on YouTube under the channel Star 7 Studio International, on Facebook Star 7 Studio International. Thank you very much.